Can you hear me now?
Hi, Dr. Taylor.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing today?
Well, I got my flat tire fixed.
That's always a good. Let me shut my classroom door. Hang on just one second.
Okay.
We're about to have a class change, so that might be kind of crazy. So didn't want to be super loud with that. Thank you so much for meeting with me. This class is stressing me, and I don't know if it's just because it's at the end of the year, if it's what I said in my email. I'm in completely unfamiliar territory, and so I don't know how best to approach it. And so I've read the chapters. I haven't started rereading chapters 1 through 3 yet, but I just want to feel like, and it could be the perfectionist in me too. I really like to have a really deep understanding of what I'm doing before I progress with that too terribly far. So anyway, I just want to do a good job.
Right. So can you turn your video on so I can see who I'm talking to?
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know how to do that.
At the bottom of the screen, if you're moving your cursor around on the Zoom window.
Does that do it?
Yes.
Okay. I'm so sorry. I'm not very adept at this at all. So this is out of my purview. So.
Okay. So you are looking through chapters 1 through 3, and yes, it is the end of the school year.
Yeah. And
the beginning of your dissertation.
Right.
So if you're a normal person, you're completely freaked out.
That's absolutely true. My husband was like, honey, just chill. And I'm like, you've been married to me for 25 years. You should know that when I'm stressed, I don't chill very well. So.
Right. So, I could do a 6-hour lecture on the 3 chapters, or you could just tell me what you think you're struggling with.
I can tell you, I really feel like my biggest issue is in chapter 2. And I think a lot of it is the terminology. I think I'm struggling with, in my head, just wrapping my brain around the terms. And then what honestly got me on the quiz is the application. I feel like, I don't know if those are the questions that I missed, but I feel like those are the questions that I hiccuped on, and that just, it was sort of like the I'm looking at the chapter now, the ex post facto and the categorical variables, and I'm struggling a little bit with the variables as far as when I was writing my quantitative questions, making sure that I don't even know if I did it right, so I don't know if what I identified was correct or not. So I went into English for a reason.
Okay, so first of all, so you probably kind of have a understanding of what a variable is, right?
Yes, and those are my understanding is the dependent variable is the one, and I think this is where I'm confusing myself with the variables because I overthink it. The dependent variable is the one where you are not manipulating it. And I've got that backwards as soon as I just said
No. Yeah, you play with one and you
don't play with the other.
Watch the changes in the other. And so, student achievement is always dependent on lots and lots of variables.
Right.
So I think you've got that straight. Independent is the one you're playing with, and dependent is totally dependent on what you're messing with. Okay.
All right. I think part of my problem is in my brain when I think about the word independent. It's not associated with anything. I think I'm just having to rethink maybe.
Right. It's easier to start with which one depends on the other.
Okay.
And then, so the one that depends, the achievement depends on this, and this. And,
okay.
The teacher's attitude depends on the way the administration handles things and the way their colleagues handle things. So dependent is their attitudes, their beliefs, their, so what's one changes the other. The one that's doing the changing is the independent variable, and one that's getting changed.
So like I'm looking at in my qualitative study. So what Dr. Price and I talked about is looking at the implementation of the STEM program into our, essentially with Advanced Ed, you can do a program or a school-wide certification, and we're going to do a program specific certification this next school year, and we're going to do that specifically with our seniors because our end product is a thesis that they have to produce. And so the thing that we would be manipulating would be the collaboration then with the senior teachers, because we're at, I don't want to say that that's one of the reasons I want to shut the door, because we're very isolated as far as there's not a lot of cross-curricular dialogue that goes on.
Collegial interaction.
There's not a lot. I mean, we have quote unquote PLCs. I don't think it fits the definition of what a true viable PLC is, even though we give lip service to it. APs are very, very heavy here. And so a lot of the senior year, we have AP teachers and they think that their subject is the most important one. So my independent variable then would be the implementation of the program, and then the dependent variables would be the end product. A, do we get the STEM certification, and B, how that senior thesis, which is the end product for the seniors, evolves. Right. Is that correct? Am I?
Well, here's the thing. If you're dealing with quantitative, you have independent and.
Okay, but I don't make the application when I'm doing a qualitative.
There's no variables, because variable refers to something that will have a number that changes. That's what a variable is. So qualitative doesn't have a variable. We call them factors, or there are things that affect each other, but you don't necessarily think that one does the other. It's all sort of together in one big picture.
To create the holistic picture, I'm looking at all these different elements to see how the cohesiveness comes together for the qualitative. Okay.
And there are people who would quantify the heck out of your PLCs. And, if I change this variable and get more of this, then will the outcome of the PLCs be, a higher positive attitude score? The teachers.
Right.
Then, maybe eventually becomes a higher achievement score for the students, but that's too many years down the road.
Yeah, no, and I don't, right now I'm so tired and overwhelmed, I don't even want to think long-term down the road, to be honest with you. Are there any guidelines when I'm looking at the application and trying to assess what type of study in the scenarios that I would use? Is there clues within the sentence? I think that's probably part of because I don't know if I'm overthinking it, if I just don't clearly understand how to make the decision if, is this X or is this Y, when making the application to that.
Gotcha. There's something that you're trying to get as a result. That's the dependent variable.
Okay.
You're playing with something else to get that result.
And so when I'm looking at the scenario on the quiz, or even in the chapters, because I've looked at the chapter quizzes that they had, and I scored about the same on it as I did on the quiz that I took. So I know chapter 2 is where I'm gapping. I just I was trying to find the page. My iPad is not behaving. Hang on a second. Anyway, where it asks the quizzes and where you're like, okay, identify. I'm sorry. My iPad's really jamming up. There it is. On the exercise pages, which is on 44, it says, based on the title of each study, identify basic or applied. And categorical or continuous. And I think that's part of where I am just, I don't know. I think a lot of times in English, and I think this is where my English background may be hurting me a little bit, is if you can argue an area and justify it in the argument, then you're okay. And I don't feel like that's the case here, because I feel like there's certainly a very clear-cut yes or no kind of thing. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes. So,
So when I took this quiz, when I was practicing with the exercises, I scored a 56 on the online quiz, and I scored probably about a 50, 60 when I took this too. So that's why I was asking for the help, because I know this is where my weak area is.
all right. So what is the difference between basic and applied research?
That's why I've got to go back and reread it. I actually bought index cards for this weekend.
Yeah.
So my plan was to go through and just reread and write, because I find if I write it down, I tend to retain more. And so I feel like applied is where you're taking something and making an application to the theory.
And you're trying to solve a particular problem, which is mostly what we're trying to do in our dissertations.
Right.
Basic is more, you're not trying to solve a problem, you're trying to get enough information so when you solve a problem, you know what to look at.
Okay. So the basic is just a simple, basically identifying what was going on, and then the application part is where you're trying to solve the problem.
Yep.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. And then categorical was where you're just essentially doing a comparison between two or more categories. And the example,
Gender.
Yes, and if you wanted to do socioeconomic or race or something along those. And then continuous is from point A to point Z in the progress that is going on. So like if we're doing if we're looking at the data for my kiddos over the course of the year, what is their improvement from September to March, or whatever it is that we're looking at?
Well, the way you measure the improvement is to take an achievement score, one score, and compare to the end score. How did that change, right? So you're looking at a score, a number, probably percent. And if you're looking at percent, it's a continuous variable, because it's always, a 1% change is this exact same meaning all the time.
Uh-huh.
And there you can have a meaningful something in between, like 77.9. We know what that means. Okay?
Right.
As opposed to, there's sometimes we put things into categories 1, 2, and 3, and that's it. And between this 1 and this 2 may be different than 2 other students who have 1 and 2. It's not the same all the time.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So but it's a number system that continues going, and that whatever's in between markers makes sense.
Okay. Okay. And then, and I think one of the, so that clears that up for me, and I hope that clears that up for me. We'll see when I take the quiz again. And then the experimental, the ex post facto survey, ex post facto. I'm sorry, it's been a super long weekend and didn't get a lot of sleep, so I'm still trying to
Okay, ex post facto, after the fact.
Okay.
Post meaning after, facto meaning fact. After the fact, you're looking at something that was already, there was already differences in things. There was a variable that varied, and now you're looking at scores or whatever to see the effect on those changes.
Okay. So like, would I do if I were doing a quantitative study on my STEM, and one of the questions that I tossed out was looking at the number of students who went into STEM, post-secondary fields. Would that be after they've gone through the program, what number or am I looking at something else? Would that be an ex post facto? Does that?
Uh, uh, if it already occurred.
Okay. If they were in college and I went back to them at the end of their freshman year in college.
Yep.
And said, what's your area of study, and looked at the numbers that were in STEM fields, then that would be a way to gauge whether or not the STEM certification we did at school was effective or not.
Right.
Okay.
So really, whether it's ex post facto or not is based on, is it in the past?
Okay.
Then yes. And did we change it on purpose, or because when usually if that's in the future, you say, okay, we're going to play with this and do it here and here and see what's different. And that's usually in the future when you do that.
Okay.
That's not ex post facto. Ex post facto is it already happened, but those things were there, so let's take a look.
Okay. And the experimental is just simply doing an experiment, right?
Yes, and so experiment is where you're tinkering.
Okay.
You're changing that independent variable and playing with it instead of just sort of taking what's already existing or already occurring without tinkering.
Okay. And the survey is just asking questions, right? How many of you ate breakfast before you came to school before a major test?
Right.
Okay. All right. Because I felt pretty good about that one.
Yeah.
And let me look at the other ones. And I really appreciate you taking time with me today. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And when they were asking questions about the research methodology, that was just essentially trying to make a determination between qualitative and quantitative. In the textbook on the questions on, I don't know if you have the textbook, but it's number 11. It says, what research methodology do you believe would be the most appropriate for investigating each of the following questions? And I can't remember on the quiz if you had questions like that. Do I need to be able to say, not only is it qualitative, but is this kind of qualitative, or is quantitative and blah, blah, blah?
For now, it's just good enough to know, is it qualitative or quantitative? Is when you do this study, is it going to be a number, or is it going to be a story, or something that's more of a description that's not necessarily numbers?
Okay.
I mean, that's really the big deal, is numbers or not.
Yes, and obviously, I'm sure you can tell by talking to me, that's why Dr. Price was like, you need to do a quantitative study.
But the thing about that is, almost anything can be quantified if you've got a quantified mind.
Yes.
And almost anything can be better studied if you're exploring and describing what's going on.
Yeah. And that's me. I mean, I really very much embrace the narrative.
But quite frankly, it's what your curiosity is that is going to determine it.
Yeah.
It's not, I'm going to be qualitative because I think of myself this way. It's, what do you want to know? Write that question. And now, what kind of question is it?
Okay. And I'm still not 100% sure exactly what it is that I want to know, because when I started this program, I thought I was in a very clear direction of this is what I want to do. And this past March, for one of the papers that I had to write, it was actually February, I asked my principal what kind of research is out there for magnet schools, and he said very little. And he says, I don't use research to make a lot of my decisions. And when I went on a advanced ed accrediting time during March, went to another magnet school, and that principal said the same thing. So I thought, well, maybe I could do something about magnet schools, and talked to Dr. Connie Smith, who's the Tennessee director of advanced ed, and she was like, well, have you thought about doing something with STEM, since that is what your certification is, as a accreditor, evaluator with advanced ed? And I was like, no. So I mean, like, I've completely shifted, almost a 180. And so I like the idea of what I'm going to do. I just am not sure what that research question is going to be yet, because I'm not too heavily involved yet into the process.
And that's a good spot, because you've got a top, and the people who think they've got it completely nailed down may or may not, and it may stay the same, and it may be completely different. This course is where you tinker with things and look at it from different kinds of questions on the same topic until you have a firm feel of what you're passionate about and what we can get done.
Right. I mean, and the time frame is just freaking me out just a little bit, because
you don't want to go more than a year.
No, I don't. I'm just thinking about the next year, though, and how crazy it is. And
which year is not crazy?
It's all crazy. It's all crazy and exhausting. And
this does not need to be overwhelming. How do you eat an elephant?
A bite at a time.
One bite at a time.
Yeah. So.
And I'm not taking you through, okay, let's do your dissertation. I'm taking you through, give me the topic, now let's play with questions, now get the question, now play with methods, now after you've done some playing, and then you decide.
Okay.
So you're in the right spot exactly.
Okay. Well,
you're not supposed to know other than the topic.
That's very reassuring. I appreciate it, Dr. Taylor. And again,
thank you for being confused.
Well, you may get some more confused emails from me as we progress, because I'm feeling, be frank, I'm feeling very overwhelmed, just because at this point, looking at the syllabus, I'm 6 chapters behind, because I really do want to I want to go back and read chapter 2 and make sure I'm very comfortable with what's going on. But with all the crazy stuff that happened with my husband this weekend, it's just, I don't know. I
always say keep the book till everybody has signed that you have graduated.
That's good advice. That's good advice. So, yeah. That's why you're in the position that you're in.
You've got a team. You've got 3 people that will be working with you and coaching you into these things. So it takes a village, and real research usually isn't done by one person. Now you're gonna do the work, but we're gonna bounce things back and forth until we agree that this is quality work and it can be done in a timely fashion.
That's what I would like to do. So, and I think one of the things, my husband, he said, honey, you're a perfectionist, and you want to revolutionize the world. He said, you're not doing that with your dissertation. Wait until you're done. I said, okay, I don't know if that, I agree with that. So
we're not trying to eat the elephant.
Yeah, a bit at a time.
We're trying to take a little chunk, a little bite.
Okay,
let's not eat elephants. Not the whole pizza.
Right. No, sorry. You said
one slice.
The elephant. I thought George Orwell.
We're going to eat the pizza. It's a huge pizza. The pizza you're talking about is, Guinness Book of World Record. And, sometimes they cook those over like a block, and then, then they slice it up and feed the entire neighborhood. And you're just going to take one slice. It's got one little slice of pepperoni on it, and you're going to chew on that and do a really great job on that.
That's my intention. So for sure. So anyway, well, thank you very much. I've got kiddos coming in a few minutes. I thought I didn't have kiddos today, but apparently I do. So
would you be okay with me posting our little discussion in the questions area?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Well,
Um,
I think that will encourage other people to go ahead and ask, and it will also just explain a couple things up front.
okay.
But
I
calming
appreciate
people
that.
down is always a good thing.
Yeah. What I tell my kiddos is I am talking you off the ledge. And if you choose to go off the ledge, at least let me be your parachute to get you down. So, uh,
Right. And you are my kiddo in this sense.
and it's I've been teaching for 18 years, and it's weird, flip, you forget the whole, and it may one thing that this whole thing has been good for me is reminding me of being much more compassionate again of my kids freaking out.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
and I truly believe you don't grow if you're not uncomfortable, but it's nobody likes change but what babies is my saying. And that's what this is all about. And that's what the textbook is. It's just change. It's me rethinking and just trying to grasp new stuff. So
Okay, well, I'll blow your mind one more time and just say, remember how this feels and remember this process, because 10 years, 20 years from now, you may be the retired teacher who's a professor guiding people through dissertations.
right. That's right. And
It's always
I
the next level, and that takes learning curve on your part again.
yeah, I know. And if we don't do that, then we're not going to ever be better. So
Right, and it takes a village, and you have to be part of the support system for the higher level too.
yeah, yep, for sure.
In the bug.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, and hopefully I'll do better on the quiz when I retake it again.
Okay, I'm sure you will, and you can always just keep retaking it.
Well, that's the plan because I've made hundreds so far. I want to maintain the perfection. Except for one class, I made it like a 98.6. So I know, shocking. Anyway,
All
well,
right, have a good day.
thank you. You too.